This interview is for information only and should not be considered as investment advice or a recommendation to buy shares in the company featured. Welcome to this Stock Box interview.
Joining us today is Oliver Friesen, the CEO of Golden Metal Resources. Thank you very much for joining us today. Oliver, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Mark. How are you doing?
Very good, thank you. You're joining us, of course, following news of a geophysical survey conducted at your Pilot Mountain project, and the survey identified 3 significant exploration targets with the potential for tungsten, copper, silver and zinc mineralization. So, first of all, could you just tell us perhaps how you identified these new targets at Pilot Mountain and how it could enhance the overall potential and value of the project?
Yeah, of course. Well, first of all, thanks for chatting, Mark. The release came out today, obviously, but there's one that came out yesterday as well, which is really important. And I'm sure we'll get into both of those. But on the geophysics that came out today, reality is when we acquired this project almost 2 years ago now, it hosted, and it currently still does host, the largest undeveloped tungsten resource in the US. So 12.53 million tons at 0.27% tungsten trioxide is a very significant in situ resource. And that's very important for listeners to understand. However, being an exploration geologist myself and being an exploration company, when we looked at this asset and did our due diligence, the thing that really drew us in was the fact that we thought, based on the work that we had done, that there was a potential to have a much larger resource at Pilot Mountain than was currently known. So obviously what we have right now is very valuable. It's allowing us to push forward some very important conversations with the US government. But the reality is we want to find out how big this could potentially be. So that's why we went and completed the geophysics back in late 2022. We received the results recently, but now we've compiled those and put those out. And obviously the results we put out today, we're very pleased with what we're seeing there. What we thought before was, which was that there was potentially a much larger story here and much larger resource, I think has been confirmed with the targets that we've identified. So we're looking forward to going and exploring these further and hopefully proving these up and adding these to the inventory at Pilot Mountain. And the important thing to note about the work that we've done, and I know a lot of investors have viewed various geophysical results, RNSs over the years from various companies. But the really important thing at Pilot Mountain is that we did the survey over existing known resources. So for instance, we did an IP survey line directly over the desert scheelite ore body. And the reason that's really important is because we can effectively look at the mapped location of that mineralized body and find out exactly what geophysical signature lines up with the tungsten, copper, silver, and zinc mineralization. So on the flip side, when you do geophysics in a brand new area, sometimes those anomalies, it's hard to know what they actually correspond to until you go and drill them. But in this case, we did survey lines over the existing mineral resource at Pilot Mountain and at Desert Scheelite. And what we found was a resistivity low or conductivity high, which matched up perfectly with the in-ground resources at Desert Scheelite. So then what we do is we take that exact same geophysical signature and we look for it elsewhere on the property. Because we're in the same geological terrain, the likelihood is if we find the same geophysical signature as known mineralization at the property, it is likely, or if we go and drill it, we're expecting that we're going to find very similar mineralization and alteration within the same geophysical signatures. So I'm going to release a video later today or tomorrow, which goes into more depth on each of the 3 targets and why they're so important. But I certainly encourage investors to go and look at the RNS we put out today, and more importantly, the figures we put out. So for instance, figure 1 alone, even if we didn't find the other 2, that would be a very significant development. I'm just looking at the map right now on my other screen. So you'll see there, if investors look at that figure 1, you'll see sort of a northeast, southwest trending resistivity low. That's going to be your dark blue, and we've outlined that with a white dash line. Now, the existing resource at Desert Scheelite falls within that resistivity low feature. And what's so significant is we've now found a larger resistivity low feature with almost the identical geophysical signature located about 200 meters to the northwest, which has never been drilled before. So obviously that's very exciting. If we go in and drill that and prove that the same alteration and mineralization is found there, I'll let the listeners kind of do the math there, but it's a very significant development, and that's just one of the features and targets that we've identified today.
Okay, so you've been looking for this geophysical signature and looking for similar geophysical signatures that then could produce potential drill targets. Effectively, that's what you've done, and these three look pretty significant.
Exactly, 100%.
Okay. Now you mentioned, and we've mentioned it a few times, about Pilot Mountain being a huge resource. You mentioned about talking with the US government. I mean, how serious are these conversations happening between the company and the government, and how important could it actually be for the United States?
Yeah, so in terms of where we're actually at with the conversations in that process, we'll put out an RNS in the future here, hopefully in short order, outlining what that process looks like and how things are progressing and what the potential outcomes could look like. But just to sort of reiterate to listeners how strategic this particular asset is, I'll just give you a few facts. Number one, the United States currently has no domestic primary production of tungsten, so there's no active tungsten mines in the entirety of the US. Another really important fact is that China produces more than 80% of the total global tungsten supply. So they have an absolute stranglehold on total tungsten production worldwide. Another really interesting fact is that as of January 1st, 2026, so about 2.5 years away now, the Department of Defense in the United States, which is a very large consumer of tungsten for various military applications, is actually banning the import of tungsten for military uses from China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. So when China is your biggest import partner, and you're banning the import of tungsten from your largest import partner, obviously there's a big deficit to make up there. So the question is, where is that tungsten going to come from to fill that gap? And when we have the largest undeveloped tungsten resource in the US, and with the results we presented today, we think it could potentially get much bigger. That puts us in a very, very exciting position. So how this is all going to manifest itself, and how are the various conversations going? As mentioned, we'll be announcing that in hopefully short order here, so the market understands how these conversations are progressing and where they're going to go from here.
Okay. Well, the RNS also mentions that the discovery indicates the potential for a larger in-ground resource, bigger than previously known, making the project more attractive for grant funding. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the company's plan for securing potential non-diluted grant funding for further exploration here at Pilot Mountain?
Yeah, of course. And I think we'll probably touch on this in the next question regarding the appointment that we made yesterday, which sort of fits into this picture. But as I mentioned during the previous question, all those points which highlight how significant and strategic this particular asset is. So the way that we're pushing this forward now is various U.S. departments, including the Department of Commerce, Department of Minerals, Department of Energy, and most importantly for us, the Department of Mines, the Department of Defense. All of these different departments have their own pools of capital that they're looking to deploy to exploration and development projects of metals that fit their particular needs. So for the Department of Defense, tungsten is very much an important one right now because, as I mentioned, that timeline coming up here in about 2.5 years where they will not be receiving any tungsten from their largest current import partner. Through the DoD, there's multiple different funding pools available. One of them is called the DPA Title III, which is a particular funding body which very much aligns with our project and the stage that we're at. So the current fiscal year, they just received $250 million US from the Biden administration. So that's one pool of capital that is currently being deployed towards exploration and development projects of defense metals. So these are projects on US soil that are focused on exploring and developing for defense metals, including tungsten, with the ultimate goal of putting these projects into production so these metals can enter directly into the U.S. supply chains. So that's just one of the funding pools that we're looking to obviously get access to, but there are various other ones which we'd be eligible for. So there's a huge strategy there, and we're going to be pushing that forward at pace with Ms. Turkmani as an advisor to the company now.
Indeed. Well, let's talk about that recent appointment then of a strategic United States government advisor to the company. Can you just tell us what that role entails and what that person's responsibility is?
Yeah, of course. So Ms. Turkmani has a very impressive resume. I encourage all listeners to go look at the RNS that came out yesterday, which highlights her resume and some of the things that she's done. So really importantly, she's located in Washington, D.C. So all of these various funding bodies, the place where these decisions are being made towards who's getting grants, how big are these grants, is all happening in D.C. So it's very important that we have a representation within DC. So Ms. Turkmani, she's very well connected in DC. She has good government connections. So the important thing now is, as an advisor to our company, she's going to be going to bat with these various groups and looking to secure funding or help us access funding, including some of the funding sources that I mentioned before through the DPA Title III. DOM, DOE, DOC, there's also other governing bodies that have funding that's now available. So we're working really closely with Ms. Turkmani now. There's various things that we're working on, and as I mentioned, we'll be putting those out to the market in due course here, highlighting which funding sources we're going for and what that process looks like. But having Ms. Turkmani on the team now as an advisor, incredibly valuable and really ensures that we're putting our best foot forward when it comes to securing non-dilutive funding to fast track this project into hopefully development.
Indeed, you're certainly not messing around with that appointment. I mean, we hear about funding available and companies saying, yeah, we'll go after it, but it really sounds like you really are taking that very seriously. So that's good to hear, Oliver. So thank you very much for joining us today. Oliver Friesen there, the CEO of Golden Metal Resources.
Thanks, Mark. Chat soon.
If you enjoyed this interview, then give us a thumbs up, a like or a retweet. Subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter and hit that notification bell to be the first to know when we release new content. There's loads of great content on our website too, across all our programs at stockboxmedia.com. Thank you for watching.